The following is an ABC News special.
Good evening. I'm Forrest Sawyer. Tonight we're going to report on the place where you spend most of your waking time, your workplace. Like it or not, we're all part of a revolution that is completely changing the way we do our jobs. Take a look at where I work. This is ABC News headquarters in New York, and it's changing dramatically. A perfect example, our studio cameras. There used to be operators behind each of these cameras, but now the operators are gone. Their positions are eliminated. These are robotic cameras, and they're all controlled by a single person who sits at this computer console. Of course, he's had to go through some retraining in order to learn this skill. It's a continuing revolution. Most of us are going to have to go through retraining more than once in our careers. Here's where I've had to go through some retraining. That old manual typewriter I started out using years ago is long gone. Now the whole newsroom is wired with computers. We monitor news reports on these screens, and we write our stories here. Of course, for us older hands, it's been a little tricky learning how to use these things, but the young men and women who are just starting out are already up to speed. Notice I say men and women. Look around this newsroom and you'll see another part of the revolution. Women, by the year 2000, will be nearly half the workforce, and white men will no longer be the majority. It bears repeating. Information and technology are transforming the way we work. During the Gulf War and the Soviet crisis, it only took a handful of people to broadcast live pictures from the scene. Workers with those kinds of special skills are getting ahead. Unskilled workers are falling behind. And here's the crisis. Most Americans are falling behind. 85% of American workers receive no retraining at all. If the United States is to stay competitive in the world marketplace, if your children are to have the quality of life you want for them, we'll all have to become part of a new American revolution. Tonight, you'll see how some Americans are answering that challenge.
Revolution at Work, an ABC News special, will continue in a moment.
The American car used to be a source of pride for this country. Now it's a bit of an embarrassment. 1 out of every 4 Americans drives a foreign car. The big 3 U.S. automakers are losing billions every year, and their cars have become symbols of the U.S. failure to compete in the global marketplace. So to regain its competitive edge, General Motors is trying a grand experiment to redesign its workplace and retrain its workers. Of course, the road to recovery is never smooth. This is a multi-billion-dollar experiment, and no one knows if it will work.
My name's Michael Siegel. I'm laid off from BOC Lansing.
My name's Peggy Eubanks. I'm from Flint, Michigan, and I'm laid off from Cadillac Plant.
City, Michigan. I'm laid off from Pontiac, and I'm going to Power.
In the last 11 years, General Motors has laid off nearly 80,000 workers and closed 50 plants. Scott Friends has been laid off twice.
A plant shutdown is devastating. To see the old plant come down, the water tower, and then they started the demolition of the building. It hurt to watch. And to see not only your life being devastated by the news of a plant closing, but all the people that you've grown to care about and their lives being torn apart, and people asking each other, what are we going to do?
What they've done is moved here to the middle of a working farm in Spring Hill, Tennessee, about as far away from the old assembly lines in Flint as you can get. It's in this environment, amid the rows of soybean and corn, that GM believes it can plant the seeds for a new kind of workplace and a new kind of car. Welcome to planet Saturn, where nothing is as it was before. building the Saturn car has created 5,000 new jobs for laid-off GM workers. But it's not just the car, the surroundings, and the jobs that are new. It's also the attitudes.
I think this is a turning point for General Motors. If we're successful, which I have no doubt in my mind, I think you will see a rebirth in the automotive industry in America.
Scott's born-again outlook didn't happen overnight. General Motors sent 99 people around the world to discover the secrets of other companies' success. After 8 years and nearly $4 billion, they think they found the cure to what ails GM.
What we've found out is that when people are involved in decisions that affect them, they support those decisions. Now, that may not sound like a big revolutionary idea, but the fact is that we tend not to involve people and then wonder why they challenge the decision.
Introduce to you President of the Saturn Corporation. You can pay me later. Mr. Skip LaFoe.
In his 35 years as a manager at GM, Skip LaFoe has seen his share of labor and management conflict. Now it's his job to bury the hatchet between the two camps by getting rid of the symbols that separated them.
We don't wear white shirts and ties as symbols of authority or whatever you want to call it. I think there was a strong need to discount those types of barriers and try to come in a much more relaxed, casual environment.
It was a significant milestone when we got Skip to take his tie off.
I feel great, too.
You could spot one coming across the plant. They all had ties on. They all had white shirts. You knew that, oh, that's management. That's them. That's the enemy.
Topping the enemy's list was Roger Smith, the former head of GM, who masterminded the massive layoffs and plant shutdowns of the 80s. But he also masterminded this, the birth of Saturn. Workers here call it Roger's baby.
At one time, I loathed Roger Smith for what he did. But, you know, who would have thought that several years later, I would be standing on my feet applauding this man for 10 minutes straight with a tear in my eye of joy that by golly, we created something good here. And it was something that I can really feel a part of, you know. I had say into how the part that I make is going to be made, and how many we should make, and what kind of specifications should we have on the part. And it's just a 180-degree turnaround.
At Saturn, Scott's depending on something the old assembly line never used, his brain. He no longer does one mind-numbing task hour after hour, living for the coffee breaks. He's part of a team here, a team that decides which parts to buy, how many to use, whom to hire. And it's up to the workers to stop production when something doesn't look quite right.
Rather than an engineer sitting somewhere calling the shots, you're calling the shots because you make the product, and it's you that makes the difference in the product. How you doing, William? And the workers know that they are the center of the circle. Everybody else is basically a resource there to help you get your job done.
Would you reject that or not?
Probably not. Okay.
Begin by assuming that they do want to do a good job. They really do care about what they're doing. And it's the leadership's job is to teach them what it is they need to do to be successful.
These employees work on salary, with bonuses linked to productivity. Time clocks and hourly wages are artifacts of what workers here call the old world. For the first time in the American automobile industry, workers and management are partners.
It would be very difficult to strike if the decision-making process really works as it's intended to. And that's a significant difference here. We solve conflict here much differently than we did in Flint, Michigan.
If all this feels a bit like an automobile revival meeting, GM believes that's what it takes to turn things around.
What kind of support do you want?
Moral support. Saturn says team members are strongly encouraged to take this course. It's designed to teach workers to trust one another. Take a step on the new age assembly line. Would you do this for your employer?
What do you think are some of the other things that could help you make your assertive statement work better?
On top of all this, workers are paid to spend 5% of their time taking classes in everything from listening and assertion to managing conflict.
It's the combination of the social skills and the technical skills that make the whole Saturn team member.
But you can't drive a philosophy. And somewhere among all the group hugs and workshops, it's easy to forget the essential question: how's the car?
It's without question the best domestic small car on the market. It is without question the best small car General Motors has ever made.
Part of the car's appeal? It's inexpensive, under $12,000. It has few defects, and surveys show that customers like it.
However, the car is not significantly better than any of the competitors, which creates the question, or leads to the question of, after so many years, why isn't the car setting standards for others to match, as opposed to just being as good as them?
This government crash test placed Saturn near the bottom of its class. At 35 miles per hour, the passenger is vulnerable to serious head injury. And there were 2 recalls. These 1,100 Saturn cars were pulled in because of a supplier's faulty antifreeze.
I had the personal experience. I was driving a Saturn at the time that was involved in the recall. And it was interesting. My own personal reaction was that, my God, if this is one of those cars, I need a different car. I really don't want to drive this car. We responded by replacing the automobile in that particular case. And feedback from our customers where they couldn't believe we were doing it. We couldn't believe they wouldn't expect us to do it, because that's what we stand for, is total customer enthusiasm.
They also stand to lose huge amounts of money. Saturn is the most expensive experiment in the history of U.S. auto manufacturing. Analysts estimate Saturn will lose over $700 million this year alone. Building a car by consensus takes more time. While the plant has the capacity to make about 250,000 cars per year, only about 50,000 will be made by their first anniversary this fall.
The fact of the matter is that Saturn is such a huge investment, it is such a visible investment, that there is a face issue. Even if Saturn continues to hemorrhage money for years and years and years, which I fully expect it to do, it is almost impossible to shut it down. Because Saturn, especially in the last year, has been promoted not so much on its hardware, but on its software. Yes, there is a car out there, but there is this mythology about the car. And the mythology was supposed to work such miracles inside the rest of General Motors that it doesn't matter that the car is going to lose money forever.
Saturn milked the mythology with its advertising campaign, which sells the idea of good people with good values working in farm country. Never even mentions General Motors. To watch the ad, you'd almost think the employees all drive tractors to work. But in fact, almost every one of Saturn's workers moved here from out of state. Even Emmett, the dog featured in this commercial, is an out-of-town actor.
If I were to buy a Saturn, it would be on precondition that I could take it down to the Saturn driveway and set it on fire, just to make a point. And I'm not the only one that feels like that. There are many, many people in this community who feel the same way.
Jim Lawrence has lived in Tennessee for years. He's a former UAW member who worked for American Motors. He'd like to work for Saturn, but couldn't even get an interview.
We got the impression there would be hundreds of jobs for local people. And I guess we heard what we wanted to hear rather than listen as closely as we should.
In the past 2 years, unemployment here in Maury County has nearly doubled. The phosphate industry has faded away. Textile plants have closed. People thought Saturn would create an economic boom. Instead, GM cut a deal with the United Auto Workers so that all employees had to be hired from a list of 50,000 laid-off UAW members. By this summer, 5,000 Saturn families will have moved to Tennessee.
It's an enormous impact, where you move in a huge bunch of people and say, here, educate these people, build them roads, build them schools. Where is your sewer connection? Where is your fire protection? Where is your police protection? And you look around and say, my goodness, where did all these Indians come from? And you've got to pay for them. The longtime resident of Murray County, who profits not one bit from Saturn being here, they're going to have to bear a heavy burden of the fiscal impact of these people coming to Murray County. And they're not very happy with it, and I can't say that I blame them.
Saturn did build a new $1 million city hall for Spring Hill, which only has a population of 1,400. And the company donated land for a new school. It also gives some money to the county, just not enough. Property, water, and sewage taxes for county residents have all gone up since Saturn's arrival.
I don't feel good about what they've done to us, so how can you be hospitable? You feel like you've been stabbed in the back. When you're talking about your family, your livelihood, the possibility of losing your job and having to move out of Murray County, and all I'm supposed to do is smile and offer them pecan pie and iced tea? No, it don't work that way.
Saturn has an answer for its critics. They're too short-sighted. Real change, the company says, takes a long time and a big investment. And so far, that's an investment they're willing to make. The only profit they've turned this year is this farm they own and operate. We asked the farmer who's been working the land just what it was he's doing right. And he said, well, the weather was good last year. If only the answer was as simple for American business.
Revolution at Work will continue in a moment.
Two facts that say a lot about this country now and in the years ahead. The fastest growing job in America, security guard. The most rapidly expanding field, healthcare. Service jobs, people who do things, not make things. That's where the opportunities lie, and with good reason. You can't export these jobs. Who wants to go to Taiwan for a heart operation? And with the rapid growth in healthcare services, the advantage lies with skilled workers. Here's a perfect example. We have such a shortage of trained nurses, we have to import them from Ireland and the Philippines. So for healthcare businesses, the challenge for the future is finding and keeping these skilled workers.
No, breathe.
How well these people do their jobs is a matter of life and death. And that's something the man who runs this hospital never forgets.
Can you call the OR?
The principal job of leadership in a hospital, and maybe in other places as well, but certainly in a hospital, is to take care of the people who take care of people.
We have any help?
We got an IV set up, and we had 5 cc's.
When you come in the door, what if the nurse taking care of you is worried about where her 3-year-old is?
Breathe, baby, breathe.
What if she's worried about whether she'll have time to get her shopping done?
Anybody got a pair of scissors on them?
Yeah, I do.
What if she's worried about the fact that she doesn't have health insurance?
She's breathing better like this.
Right.
We can't eliminate all of those worries, but I don't want her, if I'm the patient, to be thinking about that, and I don't want her, if I'm an employer, to be thinking about that. I want to be able to do everything I can to provide support for her or for him so that they're concentrating on one thing, doing the job really well.
Let me help you. Relax. Let me help you.
Let me just tell you right now, it's a girl. Well,
Okay.
you tell me.
I'll
Yeah,
let
it's
you
definitely
know.
going to be a baby.
I will let you know.
Okay, you call me. Let me know. But I worry about people bumping into the corners of these coming
No,
in.
because I noticed that the night shift had all
Erie Chapman makes it his business to know what the people who work for him go through on the job.
Since I've been here, the other head of the hospital before Mr. Chapman, the only way I kind of knew him was his picture on the wall. You know who Mr. Chapman is.
Every week, he puts on the uniform of one of his employees, everyone from housekeeper to nurse's assistant, and works alongside them for a shift.
Right underneath the tongue. He wants to take his temperature, okay?
Cheryl, can you stay with me? Hello, Cheryl. There we go.
Chapman knows that the skilled people he's got could go somewhere else. In Columbus, there are 7 other hospitals, and more than 150 in Ohio. but there aren't enough skilled workers to go around. That's a shortage that's expected to get worse in the next 10 years. So Chapman's goal is to keep people by creating one of the most employee-friendly workplaces in America.
I gotta get in here, he's gotta get breakfast by 8, and I gotta go to trial.
Come on, Boo. The daycare is one of the best things provided here at the hospital. Say good morning.
Michael Peterson, a nurse's assistant, is one of the 200 employees who uses the hospital's on-site child care center.
Oh. Both my wife and I work, and it makes it easier for us to provide for her. You can make it. Go ahead. Being able to go over and see her during the day while she's over at the care center, and knowing that they do have a very good staff over there. Say good morning.
This center cost the hospital's owner, U.S. Health, $1.3 million to build and more than $1 million a year to run. So employees pay an average of $90 a week. There is a long waiting list.
Hi. I'll pick up for Talisha Reed.
On-site childcare, on-site shopping, all provided by the hospital to keep their employees happy. They can drop off the grocery list before work and pick up the bagged items on their way home. The convenience center also handles dry cleaning, video rentals, even gift baskets.
I had a nurse stop me in the hallway right after we opened the convenience center, almost in tears. I mean, I know it sounds dramatic, but she goes and says, "You've changed my life." And I said, "What did I do?" You know, she said, "The convenience center. I used to have to spend hours shopping every week, and now, you know, now all I have to do is turn this." She was like a living testimonial.
Other benefits include flex time, health care insurance, tuition reimbursement, retraining opportunities. All this eats up 12% of Riverside's operating budget. That's almost $50 million a year.
So it looks expensive, but how much is a person worth to us?
For me, it's the benefits.
And how much is their work worth to us?
I think the flexible scheduling here has been a real benefit for me.
It's worth a lot.
If you're not happy about your job, it's going to transfer on to the people that you take care of.
I think it is absolute nonsense for employers to say that they can't afford child care, that they can't afford some of the things that are important to employees' feelings of self-worth and value on the job. When you hear a company talk about cutting costs and they're doing it in a stupid way, they talk about people as units of expense. So a company will say, well, we have 200 units of expense that need to be eliminated. Here's an organization not following a value system that I could be part of. And when people talk like that, they're headed for trouble.
Riverside Hospital was headed for trouble a few years ago, facing rising costs and high employee turnover rates. But instead of worrying about units of expense, they invested heavily in their employees. And so far, that seems to be paying off. This year, the hospital will produce total revenues of $400 million and show a healthy profit. And it's now rated one of the top 10 hospitals in the country.
The problem with the benefits and salary wars that hospitals are engaging in today is they're driving up labor costs.
Healthcare analysts like Russ Coyle are watching what's happening in hospitals like Riverside. They're concerned with how these new employee benefits will be passed on to patients.
The consumer will actively pay for every benefit that a hospital adds. Clearly, the trend is to drive up the benefit side as well as salaries, and that inevitably is going to come back to healthcare spending and to the cost of health services to the average consumer.
They said she had a temperature. Is she okay?
Somehow, this hospital seems to be different. Even with one of the best benefit packages around, they've managed to keep the costs down. Bringing this baby into the world, for example, at Riverside, will cost almost $1,000 below the national average.
What you want to do is actually put your foot to the edge of the film because you're going to have her roll her foot inward 45 degrees.
One way they save money is by spending to recruit and retrain the workers they have, a short-term expense that seems to pay off in the long run.
Stop.
A lot of people want to work here. We have the chance to pick carefully, but we don't want to have to keep doing this over and over again. So we have put in incentives for people to stay.
Evidently she was in last night because she has these falling spells.
Hospitals across America run turnover rates of about 20%. We run 12 to 15%. 0% is impossible because people die, people retire, and people move.
Evidently the patient refused to be admitted.
In some parts of this hospital, including the nursing staff, our turnover rate's down to 8%. It doesn't get much better than that.
I think as long as you do your job here, you can stay here till you retire.
I do what I good at it, so I'm going to stay for a long time, I hope.
If they turn this profit, good, because that makes my job more secure.
I'm not, of course, trained as anything, actually, except a lawyer, which is obviously of no help at all to patients on 6 East, only harm. I know I sound arrogant when I say this, but the fact is that the sensible management approaches that we advocate in the U.S. Health and Riverside organizations work. You want to know how they work? Take a look at the bottom line, take a look at the workforce down there, talk to the people, check with the medical staff, check with whoever you want. This stuff works.
Come on, Chris, do one now. Let's go two here.
If the American workforce and the American employer is going to compete successfully in the next 10 years, not only at hospitals but anywhere, here's what they have to do. They have to provide a wonderful, supportive, nurturing environment for their employees, even if it costs a lot of money.
Chris, we say now, Chris. Let's get some. Wait a minute.
The fact is, what you've seen at Riverside Hospital is an exception. For many businesses, the trend now is to cut benefits in order to contain costs. But more and more, America is becoming a service economy, and this shortage of skilled workers could force businesses to do what they say they cannot afford to do, start investing in their people again.
Revolution at Work continues.
Here's a test question for you. How do you solve this math problem? If a man makes $7 an hour, how much does he earn in 8 hours? Do you add, subtract, multiply, or divide? The answer is you multiply. $7 times 8 hours. Now that's a fairly basic math problem, but when New York Telephone tested job applicants with questions like that one, 3 out of 4 failed. In fact, they had to go through 50,000 job applicants to fill 2,100 entry-level positions like telephone operator. It is a crisis in basic education all across America.
New York Telephone, so I help you.
So businesses like this one are trying to solve the problem by contributing directly to the education of their potential future employees. And in California, we found a unique example of this relationship between private enterprise and public education.
Please deposit 25 cents for the first 5 minutes.
Dale Van Natta and Refugio Luna are creating an opportunity for this 9th grader, Marlene Luna. She's Refugio's daughter and Dale Van Natta's investment in the future. A corporate executive with the Space and Defense Technology Division of TRW, Van Natta sees trouble ahead.
When I went to school, could drop out and go get a job in a steel mill as a laborer and make a fairly decent wage. And those days are over.
Refugio Luna works as a gardener in Beverly Hills. His education ended after 7th grade, but he wants more for his daughter.
I
think that the way my parents taught me to work is very important, but I'd like my children to be more educated than I am.
Marlene attends a school in Dominguez Hills, California. It is a bold experiment, a partnership between business and public education designed to help students like Marlene.
I would like to become either a medical doctor or a biomedical engineer, either one.
The California Academy of Mathematics and Science is about to begin its second year. Almost all of the students are young women and minorities. It's a public school but gets 2/3 of its money from private business, and its agenda from corporate executives like Dale Van Natta.
The need is critical, the need is immediate. We have an educational system that is sick within, and we can't repair that or heal it by addressing bits and pieces and parts of it. We have to address the entire system.
Yes, this is Doug Stewart with the California Academy. I was just following up on a meeting I had with Dr. Freeman a couple of weeks ago.
Doug Stewart is the fundraiser in residence. When he goes to corporations asking for contributions, he finds that many of the people he talks to understand the need.
Sarah, let me give you a call back. I've got another call I need to take, and it could be money. So I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. They're getting worried. They're getting scared. Fear is a great motivator. They're concerned about where they're going to get their future employees.
TRW pledged $1 million. Hughes Aircraft and Rockwell International gave $250,000 each. A dozen other high-tech corporations contributed to a total of more than $3 million.
How much?
Maybe a quarter of an inch, a little over.
We hire very highly technically trained people. And it's no secret that there's going to be an enormous shortfall of scientists and engineers by the turn of the century. So we're interested in improving the pipeline so that we do get more qualified employees.
What is that? If I put it down, PT.
Oh, it's the square root of PA times PB.
Yes, PA times PB. Square root. All right.
Students here are given an education in math and science skills that will be equivalent to a college sophomore. But this school spends $10,000 a student. That is more than most public schools spend. And the results show the difference. Too many high school graduates cannot pass 8th grade level math tests.
What do you know about this part then? What does that have to be? Yeah, it's 4.
We're teaching minor league math. We're playing in a major league world of work.
Lamar Alexander is implementing President Bush's education strategy, which relies heavily on an alliance between business and education to make schools better.
American business is probably much more involved in contributing to the schools than in any other country in the world. But we need to be more involved because our business leadership has the money, the know-how, and most importantly, they've experienced this traumatic period in the 80s of making these systematic changes to meet world competition, and that experience can help our schools do the same thing.
But Barbara Solomon, a professor at the University of Southern California, believes business is being asked to do too much.
To say to business and industry, you are the salvation, you take these kids, you make them literate, you prepare them to get a job in your company, is totally oblivious of the lack of commitment to education in the home. So therefore, to put it all on the relationship between business, industry, and the school is wrong.
Without industry, the school would not have opened.
Kathy Clark spent 20 years in education before becoming principal of the California Academy of Math and Science. She's worried that this kind of partnership with business has its limits.
So we still got a high class size in the entry-level courses.
There are no fast fixes for this, and money and equipment and manpower are only the beginnings of the issues. I don't know that that's going to be the long-term solution, industry assistance to education. Maybe it's a transitionary one as we have great needs and great demands and an economy that's having some difficulty at this point. I don't pretend to know what the structure financially of education will be beyond the year 2000.
I wish I could say that in all cases that business and education are on the same side. There are quite a few people in education who still don't understand the value of a business-education relationship.
Then circles equals to 360
Just add up the angles and subtract?
Yeah, subtract.
It's worth remembering that this school, with all its resources, is part of the Los Angeles Unified School District. Like many school systems nationwide, the district faces catastrophic budget cuts. This summer, it trimmed $33 million from an already decimated budget and laid off 800 teachers. Still another problem, raising awareness of the crisis.
The fact is not enough people are worried yet. I mean, a lot of people say the nation is at risk, but I'm okay, when in fact they're not okay. Most parents think the schools on the whole aren't very good, but their school is okay, their kid is doing well, they themselves know enough, when in fact they don't.
All right, what part of it do you read? The top or the bottom of the curve? The bottom. The bottom of the curve.
At best, the California Academy of Mathematics and Science can offer its four-year curriculum to only about 500 students. In 1994, Marlene Luna will be in the first graduating class if corporate funding holds up.
It's helping me to build up to my goals, you know. It's building up my character, being responsible, and, you know, making me study a lot so I can be the best that I can be, and I think that's good.
We're going to benefit. We're going to benefit no matter who they go to work for.
No. If you take the 103 over 100, and I got 97 over 100, if you take...
The benefits of this partnership may best be measured in the lives of these students.
Your PhD.
But for further evaluation of business's role in public education, we gathered together some leaders who have given the issue a lot of thought. Lynn Martin, Secretary of Labor. Mary Futrell, teacher and former president of the National Education Association. Madeline Cartwright, principal in the Philadelphia school system. Bill Brock, former Secretary of Labor, chairman of the National Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills. Eleanor Holmes Norton, Congresswoman, District of Columbia. And Kay Whitmore, president of the Eastman Kodak Company. And how long have you been a teacher?
32 years.
32 years. Are our schools better or worse? Are our students better or worse?
Okay, I'll have to say that in the 32 years, our students are not as good as they were 32 years ago. A lot has happened in the world of youngsters in the last 32 years. A lot has happened in the home, in the family.
30 years ago, we could look at a certain group of people going through the school and we said, well, you can get a job and earn a decent living whether you have a high school diploma or not. And that world has changed dramatically.
I can just tell you this. 20% of high school graduates are functionally illiterate. They can barely read the diploma they've been given.
You know, it's just awesome. 700,000 of our children leave school every year. If we were killing 700,000 buffalo in the United States every year, we'd have a national revolution. But 700,000 children can lose their opportunity for life, and nobody does anything. When are we going to get mad? When are we going to get sick of this thing and say, we've had enough? There are some specific things that need to be done.
I come at this saying we've got problems throughout the entire system. I think the education system is not preparing people adequately for advanced training or for the workforce.
And if you're going to survive in the workforce, you're not going to survive as a worker who simply plugs things into a hole. You're going to have to be able to think. You have to be able to work with groups of people. You're going to have to be able to function in a work environment that's changing constantly. And that type of training, that type of education will not simply come out of the schools. It will have to come from the schools and the work community working together.
The business community deserves perhaps more credit than any single group in the society. They were the Paul Revere's of education. You know, competitiveness is coming, competitiveness is coming. I mean, they sounded the alarm and said, you're not giving us what we can use to be competitive. And they said, we're trying to make up for some of it ourselves. How long can American business go on essentially re-educating people after they get them from the schoolhouse? I don't think very much longer.
And, you know, we've got the worst school-to-work transition in the world, and in any competitive country, because we're not communicating to our kids what they need to know.
A lot of people are now proposing that there is a white knight to all this problem. We go to the business community. They're the ones who can solve it. They're the ones who've got money. They're the ones who know about accountability. They ought to get involved in education. How about it, Kay?
I would warn that very few of us in the business community think, in fact, we're teachers or that we understand how to teach. At least from my point of view, the business community's role is to state the need, which is we got a serious problem, we got a serious quality problem, we should work on that problem, and then interact with the whole community, every aspect of the community, to try to say we've got to raise standards and we've got to change that whole structure. I think that's the primary role of business.
Madeline, when a businessman comes to you We'll fantasize for a moment. He's got a bucket of money. He says, where do I put this money? What do you need? How do I make it better for you?
Quality teachers. You need to put money in luring quality teachers and in training them.
Does anybody worry that the person who's putting up the money wants to have something to say about the agenda? Does anybody worry that America's corporations will start establishing what should be taught? Are you worried
I
about
worry
it?
about that greatly. I think that when you start to take gifts, you have to see what is coming from behind it.
I would say that, yes, I understand that if they put their money in, they're going to want some more say. And I will be willing to sit down with them from day one, and as we work as partners and trying to figure out what do we need to do to improve the quality of education. And I am treated as a full partner, not a silent partner, or not a Johnny-come-lately partner. I'm willing to sit down and work with you to try to figure out what we need to do.
Fact is, people prepare themselves, or should, for what industry in fact needs. Industry has never said, and will never say, I bet, here's a curriculum that we want you to implement in the schools. But we shouldn't be talking about what is industry going to do by voluntarily coming in, as Kay has done, and saying, we're going to help you. What kind of way is that to fund schools?
I've been wondering what kind of unreal world we live in when we talk about business funding education. Right. I mean, but what business can do that it is not doing is telling the schools what in the dickens it wants. Ask a teacher what it takes to prepare a child for college, and you get a real clear answer. Every teacher knows. Ask them what it takes to prepare a child for work. They don't give you good answers. They give you 50 different answers because we haven't communicated to them what are the functional skills that allow a person to be productive as a human being in the employment sector.
Some people say, why is it we're doing so poorly and other countries seem to be doing better? One of the distinguishing differences, I believe, is we are the only country who has not set some terms of expectation, some kinds of standards of performance.
I couldn't agree more about investing in standards, because if people don't have something to shoot for, they're not going to shoot for it. It's very hard to motivate people except through standards, and we have standards in everything we do.
And we have whole groups of youngsters that don't see the relevance of their school experience to work. The reason it matters isn't just because it's the right thing to do. It matters because people who are content and whose talents are being used through their lives at work really are happier people. It really is part of what America is supposed to be about. So we have to change a lot, and if we don't, the world already is, and we will leave our own children behind.
Well, let me tell you, there has been a lot of talk about the involvement of business in education, but we did some looking into it. And when you talk about involvement in the public schools, Kodak's doing something, IBM's doing something, other companies are doing something, but many of them that we found were highly publicized were just thin gruel. How much of this is public relations? How much of this is just talk?
It's not public relations, and it's not just talk, but it's not very effective. That's the problem. You got some really caring, committed men and women in business who want to do something. They don't know what to do.
Right.
That's the problem. We did a survey, and we asked them, are you making a fundamental difference? 95% said no.
Secretary Martin, where do you see the central problems that we have to look at?
In all of the discussions, we've still forgotten one thing, and that's that kid. It isn't just what companies need, and it isn't what unions need, or what teachers want, or principals, or parents, and even all of those wonderful things. It's that youngster will be doomed his entire life, or her entire work time, with low wages unless we radically change.
In the workplace, in the business world, if we keep driving down the road we're going right now, we don't make the kinds of changes the Secretary of Labor is suggesting, 10 years from now, what does the world look like?
U.S. world will look like a fractured world with an affluent, prosperous, doing reasonably well, not as well as today, probably lower standard of living for everyone, and an underclass. A very disadvantaged underclass who can't participate and therefore is trapped in all the things that people do to self-destruct.
I believe that what we've got to do is to create a synergy between home and school. We must find a way to connect those two so they work together and once again produce a whole child and a whole employee who's able to compete in the global marketplace.
We have to educate kids. Then we must involve the parents. We must involve industry. We must involve government. We must involve the labor force to say, what are we going to do together to make it happen? And all those things that we must do, we must identify them and get on with the business of doing them.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the conversation. We'll be back in a moment with the closing word. It used to be easy. Americans counted on their lives getting better every generation. Now we're going to have to run just to stay even. We'll have to be smart to get ahead. Like every other part of the economy, we in the news business have had to make some painful adjustments, trying to find more efficient ways to do our jobs. And the lesson is simple. We'll all have to keep learning and changing in order to create this new American revolution. I'm Forrest Sawyer. Good night.
To receive a transcript of tonight's program, please send $5 to Revolution at Work, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.
This has been a special presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
America's watching ABC.